Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink. With me, as always, is Joe Smith of The Athletic, bringing you all of your insider info on your Minnesota Wild and Gophers hockey. And I guess of late, with neither of them being in action, we've got the Stanley Cup playoffs with those still involved and the PWHL playoffs that we'll be hitting on a lot more heavily. But Joe, the big news today, like we talked about at the brewery a couple days ago, there's a new Lord of the Rings movie in the works.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to think about it because, they seem like they put a bow on the end of it pretty well at that point, at the end of the third movie. But I'm excited. I mean, I think anybody who's Lord of the Rings fan is excited to see what's next. And there's still characters you can kind of develop and kind of revisit later on. So I'm all for another 4-hour movie, extended version.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cautiously excited. I'm absolutely going to watch it no matter what it is to see what's going on. Little nervous from some things people say that Andy Serkis, who's the guy that does all the wears the CGI suit and stuff for Gollum, he's going to be kind of the lead director with Peter Jackson there to hopefully keep the guardrails up. But I saw, because I didn't know what the basis was for this, and I need to dive in a little bit more on what the actual plot is for the Lord of the Rings Hunt for Gollum, is what they're calling it, to release in 2026. But I saw that apparently there was a short fan film back in 2009 called Hunt for Gollum. So I don't know if it's based on that or if that inspired it or what the backstory is. I'm going to have to do a little bit more digging and report back.
Yeah, Gollum must be superhuman, man. The way he went out, I thought, there was no way. But yeah, no, that'd be. And I wonder what the main character. I wonder which one of the main characters will be part of this one. Who's re-upping to be part of this one?
It's gonna be interesting because that's gonna funnel through slowly, and as soon as any actor gets attached to it, people are gonna immediately just gut react, excitement, panic, whatever. But so yeah, stay tuned on that, everybody. On top of, if you haven't already seen the series on Amazon. I thought the first season was awesome. People talk a lot of shit about it online. So watch it for yourself if you're at all into the trilogies and make your own decision, because season 2 comes out sometime this summer or this fall. So we'll see. Everyone keep tabs. I know, Joe, you'll have some time on your hands, not nearly as much as you might think once the baby arrives.
There'll be some chill time, I think, hopefully at night, and maybe the House of Dragon. If it's not too scary for the kiddo, but there should be some binge watching things if between feedings and nap time and stuff. So
they won't know the difference. They just see a big bright light.
It's crazy how they show in the beginning how the baby's vision is blurry for the first 2 months or something like that. And you're like,
it's nuts.
At least I'm not good looking, so that's good. So
that'll be the immediate gratification. All of a sudden they actually look at you, they're like, oh, hi. And then they're like, wait, Mom, what?
Yeah. What's going on here?
Flip it.
That's why it takes them so long to say the words mom and dad, right? They got to see who the heck that person is.
Yeah, got to attach something to it.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. Well, we've got a rundown here. We got plenty of hockey topics. We got a great interview banked away from Natalie Darwitz, GM of your PWHL. Team Minnesota is currently named, and actually, we'll hear a couple different name options that might be considered for this upcoming season. Of course, end it all up with our Keyboard Warriors segment, everyone's hot takes, brought to you by our good friends at Barrel Theory. So, Joe, let's just kick it off with a simple one. Matthew Wood is officially a Gopher. We can all lament now. We've heard the rumors. It's done.
And it's a big deal. I think in the transfer portal, the big name programs are going to get the best of the best, and Wood does provide, and then especially with Snuggerud coming back too, they didn't to replace him. And I don't know if he'll necessarily fit just right in that first line. Maybe he will, but all of a sudden you have another bit of firepower there offensively. Snuggerud will be better. Oliver Moore, I think, will be better second year. Middlestat, you have a few guys that you can kind of step in and grow into their roles. So I know every big name program has to go in the portal at some point. They're going to lose some guys, but to get him, I think it's definitely a huge addition for them.
well, very, very excited. But to your point, we'll see where things settle out. Like, do they leave the first line intact and slot him in to give depth down the lineup? That all remains to be seen. We just know that we're excited. Beyond that, the excitement, not necessarily with the Wild's draft pick, being that they stayed stagnant at 13. I think any Wild fan that you ask would gladly accept that, knowing that Chicago did not move up to number 1. That's really all that anyone cared about.
Yeah, they couldn't stand the idea of having a Bedard Celebrini 1-2 punch down the middle. Like, already, they got so many great prospects in that system. I mean, we watched it this year in the Big Ten,
Yeah.
Nazar and like all these guys, like they've got some really talented kids coming there. So I guess if the Wild weren't going to move up, their 2% chance of getting to the top 3, seeing Celebrini go all the way out to probably San Jose was a good thing. Although the number 2, number 3 picks, like there's there's a stud number 1 defenseman there. Michigan State, I think he'll be a guy that I think anybody would love to have. So, but yeah, just the whole, optics of having them getting number 1 picks back-to-back years would be excruciating for not just the Wild fans, but fans around the league.
And as weird as it sounds, because he is going to be a great player, I kind of hope the Blackhawks pick him because I very much want them to not go in on an Ivan Demidov, who is going to be, like, per sources, spoke to Z, better than Matvei Michkov. So if that tells you anything about the way he was talked about, this is a guy that's going to be an impact player real soon.
Yeah, we had our writer and Scott Powers in Chicago for The Athletic. He did asked 8 or 9, draft experts of who they should take between the two of them. And I think a majority picked Demidov. He just picked up they picked rare to find kind of that highly skilled guy up front that can do it all. So I think wouldn't be surprising to me at all if they go with that route.
Yeah. And if you want to punt on this, by all means, given that I know the draft is going to be a very small focus for you, just given the timing of Baby Smith arriving, but any names that you've been hearing pretty regularly or any names that stand out and intrigue you for the Minnesota Wild at 13?
Well, I think the one that stands out, just since we talk about the Gophers a lot, is Cole Yzerman, as a guy who was a Gopher for a hot minute. And then obviously went over to Boston. So, but he's a guy who could be in that range of the 10 to 13 to 14 or whatever. And we did the mock drafts at The Athletic, and I think that's where Scott Wheeler, we had him where he landed Yzerman at number 13.
Yeah. That's a tough one for Wild fans because he is like what the Wild have always wanted, right? Fans have been dying for a pure sniper, which is what he is. Yeah. We saw, though, this past year, a guy like Charlie Stramel, who year prior was projected around 10. And then we saw him fall because of a down year. And then another down year was piled on top of it. Yzerman this year didn't do anything to improve his stock. And him falling isn't just attributed to his play. There's a lot of other guys that really stepped up and had great years, but there's going to be lingering fear of what is the floor for this guy? I don't know. I'm certainly not going to be upset if they take him, though.
Yeah, and he may not be available, right? He may not be at that point, but I think after last year, I would have to imagine the Wild have to go in and say it's not just about positional need. You got to be able to go best player available here. You can't just be like, well, the Wild have their D locked up for the next year or two with the guys in place. If there's a really good young D that you think can surpass the guys that have in Iowa right now, you go out and swing at that. If one of those guys falls, I think you have to go that route. So I think most time I've been around Tampa for a long time, and they never really went around positional need in their system because they know that those guys get traded away. You could trade for those guys or whatever. They always took best player available, and it wasn't 100% accuracy, but you find that guy, you can either use him or you can trade him for a guy. They traded Nolan Foote, for example, for Blake Coleman in that deal or whatever. So yeah, I think you got to find a place where you can take some swings, especially if you feel comfortable with some of the guys in your system, which they do. They do year off. They Ohgren will play next year at Harley Heights. So they do have some guys that they really like. So if you find a place to take a swing there, 13, or we could talk about this later on, but like, you have some trade chips too. Like if you want to move up in some ways, if you find one of those guys that falls that a spot or two and you want to upgrade, you have some chips to do it with. So, because they've been able to they've been holding on to their picks a lot the last 3 years, and that's been Bill Guerin's MO. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little more open this year to trading or to moving up a little bit.
For sure. No, and there's so many different ways. You could package something to move up. Maybe there's a world where you slide back a little bit to get more depth in the draft, because consensus is if you're outside the top 10, like there's a whole new tier that opens up depending on which guys Billy and Judd are focused on. So like you might be able to drop back to the late teens, early 20s, pick up mid-round picks and still get the guy that you got your eye on. But there's certainly a lot of jousting for position, and there's going to be a lot of smoke screens leading up to the draft on who people are even going to take, because there is a big, like the tiers are much bigger and wider than they were this past year. Talent is still there, but it's just a lot less decisive beyond Celebrini of who goes where. And
then everybody's boards are going to might look a lot different too, where the top of that tier will look different with San Jose or Nashville than it does with Minnesota. So, it's 13 is kind of an intriguing pick because it's outside the high elite level guys, but it's not towards the back end where you're kind of taking flyers on people. So they should be able to get a player at that spot that could be an NHL player, a guy who can be there in a few years. So, the lottery didn't work out for them, but they'll at least have a good position there to find a quality player that they hope can not be position based, but just more based on the best player available.
Yeah, completely agree. And any of you that are just starting to tap in now that, the Wild are done, we're getting to summer, this is when you start your crunch of prospect opportunities. Now that we know where the Wild pick and we have a better range on which players will be options. Those of you listening or watching on YouTube right now, live as we drop on Wednesday, tonight, you will be able to jump into the Judd'z Budz live stream, and there's actually going to be a thorough breakdown on anywhere from 5 to 10 guys that are going to be right in that range for the Wild. So if you just want to get more acclimated, certainly feel free to join us. IIHF Worlds, Joe, there's a lot of Minnesota Wild participation. There's been a lot going around on Twitter around it too, but I don't know anything in particular that you've had your eye on or that you want to bring up.
Well, the clip of Eck and Boldy going at it was pretty funny. I thought, battle in front of the net, like he doesn't give a shit who it is. Like he's an annoy you right there. So I think that was coming up. I mean, I think the idea of how many guys that they have playing is so important, just because of, obviously a lackluster year here, that they want these guys to go there and have experience winning. And odds are one of the guys at one of the Wild players is going to end up with a medal or a high medal, just because of how many guys are playing for their Sweden or USA or whatever. So, I think overall, seeing Gustavsson bounce back and have some good starts right off the bat at Worlds. I know they're not in the medal round and stuff yet, but sure. I think that's a good opportunity for him to kind of reset and have a good step forward in the off season. All the Swedes playing together is pretty cool. I would like curious to see how Norway does, just to see if Zuccarello in their country can get another Olympic shot in 2026. That'll be a big thing for them. But you see the goalie the Wild picked up to be their Iowa ace potentially was shutting down USA for Latvia. So it's an amazing story. So it could be a good pickup there.
Yeah, not upset about that at all. And with Gustavsson too, we'll talk about it all summer, I'm sure. Well, at least up until the draft when decisions probably get made. But does Gustavsson playing well mean that we're more inclined to keep him? Or, hey, now he's a nice shiny toy that's even more movable of an asset? That's, a lot of wait and see, I'm sure.
Well, it's interesting. I'll mention this later in our pod, but we did a annual Wild fan survey at The Athletic, and we had asked fans a bunch of questions like, are you open to trading Marco Rossi? You weigh against it? Are you open, what do you think Phil Gustafsson gets in a return? Like, what's your confidence in Billy Guerin at this point? And some interesting responses, I think, and that'll come out on Wednesday, which is when this pod comes out. So check that out in The Athletics. We had a lot of really good responses from fans on a lot of things, like who should be traded, who the guys you're most excited about prospect-wise, everything to the arena renovations. So we'll have a lot of that, including on Gustavsson, on Rossi, and how worried are you if Kaprizov is going to resign or not in a year?
Yeah,
so,
that's going to be interesting. I don't know. That has to be like a weird, fun exercise to go through, but also like really mentally damaging at times, I'm sure, just to read through some of it.
Well, at least we didn't open the comments where they couldn't give it a half hour, or half page diatribe. It was more so yes, no, somewhat disappointed, mostly concerned, obviously concerned. So you have a better range, but I know it's not a 100% accurate thing of the whole entire fan base, because people who are diehards, the ones who subscribe, ones who even do not subscribe and just go on the Google Doc to do it, are only a segment of the fan base. But it does give you an interesting feel of how it changes from this year to from last year, how they feel about a certain player, how they feel about Bill Guerin, their job. So definitely worth giving it a look.
For sure. So then we've got the bomb dropped by Russo today as we record on Tuesday. Vladislav Firstov, unconditional waivers. What do we know here?
It's a tough one. I actually talked to Firstov when I was in Iowa like a few months back, and he made it seem as though he had only played maybe like 6 or 7 games at that point with Iowa, because he came over and was adjusting, but he said he really kind of was liking it, and his whole goal is to play in the NHL, right? And he's maintained that, and so I think you get the sense that he might go back to the KHL, play in Russia, which is possible. I think for him, he hasn't given up the dream of playing in the NHL. It's more so which place is better for him to do that in. I know when I talked to him before, he was like, well, the reason why I left Iowa the first time was Igor Larionov texted me and said, hey, you want to play here? We'll give you top 6 minutes and do this, and you'll play closer to your family and you'll play a bigger role. And he really enjoyed that. He enjoyed playing around his family and being close to home. And this year, obviously it was kind of a makeshift Iowa Wild team. He wasn't, wasn't like a dominating force in the top 6. He didn't really maybe have that kind of impact. So I don't know all the full details yet, and I haven't talked to him yet, but anytime this kind of thing happens where there's contract termination, it's usually revolving around a player or an agent going to a team and saying, we want to go play in this place or not. I'm not sure if he's going to be a hot NHL free agent pickup, whatever, but it makes sense that if this is the case, it would make sense that it would be back there. If he knew he wasn't going to be playing for the Minnesota Wild next fall, he wouldn't be a guy they thought that would be coming in there and making the lineup. So that's just my kind of best read on it.
Yeah, tough when, obviously had a great year in the KHL. Sounds like the short stint he had in Iowa looked the part. I'm sure a lot of fans not going to be able to understand this one, but like you said, as we get into the weeds with it a little bit more, I'm sure more of that picture will get formed. Mm-hmm. Stanley Cup playoffs, which again, Wild fans may or may not even be aware are going on, but a couple topics here that are at least worth addressing more from a news standpoint than necessarily talking about the individual games. We have Valeri Nichushkin, Colorado Avalanche, unfortunately clipped, no pay for at least 6 months due to a relapse and basically breaking his agreement to avoid any substance abuse. I don't know what you've heard behind the scenes about this one. I
have not heard anything specifically. I know I saw what was reported by a couple different places that he had failed the drug test, and that triggered him going into, I think, stage 3 of the player assistance program, which guarantees a 6-month suspension, and couldn't have come at a worse time for his team, the Colorado Avalanche, who were playing a must-win game 4 against Dallas, and they were missing Tays too, so it was 1-2 punch. You lose, the day of the game essentially, and the Stars just dominated them that game. And then it didn't seem like the Avalanche had any legs, any major passion there in that game. So you feel these are difficult situations because you feel for the person if they're going through some sort of problem off the ice or an addiction or whatever. Like you want to be empathetic in that respect because it's not a black and white situation, but you also know that at the basic level of the team and the brotherhood there, this does put his team in an awfully difficult spot 2 years in a row. And you kind of wonder going forward what his future is going to be like in Colorado. And considering McKinnon's their best player, right? Or their best MVP candidate, but Nichushkin is a guy who helped carry them to a cup win a couple years ago against Tampa and was leading scorer this year. And they're just not as deep as they were before. And to lose a guy like that, it's just crushing.
Yeah, that is really unfortunate. Again, like, we don't know what it's like to have that kind of a problem either. Like, I do feel for him too. It's not as simple as, oh, he just decided to do it. Like, when you're a user and you relapse like that, like, I hope he can get the help he needs and find a way. Like, hockey aside, maybe he's never going to play in the NHL again, but at least get things right with his life so that he can move on from some of those challenges. It's tough.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's a sports story because he's a part of a major sports team, but it's also, there's the human element on the other side. And I'm glad there's programs in place they can go back into, and maybe this run helps, or maybe this is the wake up call, that he needs to have people around him support him to get him in a better place. But for the micro view of it, of him with this team and Avalanche trying to get back in the Cup final, like, as of this podcast, they're in pretty big trouble right now, facing what I think is team to beat in the Western Conference, Dallas Stars.
Yeah, down 3-1 going into their game tonight as you listen to this on Live Drop. Then we've got the Florida Panthers, who are up 3-1 in their series, respectively. That would have been last night. It's always weird when we talk about the past from the future, but last night, as you listen to this, Florida Panthers, though, Joe, I know there's an article out there. Everyone, if you're not a subscriber already, make sure you subscribe to The Athletic. But why don't you talk a little bit about Mike Russo's article on Gustav Forsling?
Absolutely. As Russo wrote about Forsling, the defenseman for the Florida Panthers, one of the top defensemen, I think, in the league, quite frankly, kind of underrated guy who I think his fourth team right now. He's with the Blackhawks before. Vancouver gave him up. He claimed off waivers from Carolina, who had a stud blue line at that time when he was there. But now he's locked in his long-term 8-year deal, shutdown defenseman for the Panthers. And I think it's one of those examples of why you don't give up too soon on young defensemen, because they take a while to develop. And for him, it was the takes of being patient, but also just not being in the right fit in an organization, right? Where Carolina, he was boxed out by a lot of maybe better or more their homegrown guys. Chicago's going through a transition period there. But it was a good story by Mike, just talking about kind of how did everybody else miss out on this guy? Like, this is the same guy who was put on waivers, the same guy who was kind of discarded, odd man out, and now all of a sudden he's they would not be here without this defenseman. Forsling's been terrific. So a good, and that is not to say that every single player in AHL Iowa is going to be Gustav Forsling, but it's more the Wild would love that, but it's more of an idea of there should be some patience with some of those guys that may take a little longer than others, and know that not everybody has that straight line path to the NHL. So I think that's just one way we can kind of parallel that to the Minnesota Wild if you're talking about Wild prospects.
Sorry, Joe. I blacked out for that whole thing and just heard we need to get Kalen Addison to the Florida Panthers immediately. Very good points. And again, it doesn't mean that every prospect is going to turn out. It does mean, especially when we talk about defensemen, patience. Like, these guys take time to develop. It is not like forwards where you can just jump in and go. There's a lot steeper learning curve, but great for Gustav Forsling. And again, everyone, so if you're a subscriber, go check it out. If not, what are you doing? Last piece here, the very interesting, probably I'd argue the most exciting series that we have. I mean, that's splitting hairs, obviously, but we have Edmonton, Vancouver. with the good old Vancouver Canucks up 2-1. And one of the central stories with this series is goaltending. I don't know how else to label it.
Yeah, and you have Stuart Skinner, who was struggled in the series, and now he's getting replaced as of this recording for Calvin Picard. So he's starting in for this game. Edmonton has had these issues for a few years now under Ken Holland, and the Campbell experiment didn't necessarily work. You have a bunch of teams that might be looking for goaltending this offseason. And I think, the Canucks have Demko when he's healthy, and he could potentially be back later this round. But I think the Oilers are an example of a team that could be in the market for a goaltender. Let's say if Filip Gustavsson is available this summer, for example. So as much as, and it's just tough for guys like you have McDavid and Draisaitl, who are, superstar players, and they're big game playoff players. They don't fade in the postseason. They're like having point per game or, multiple points per game, and they're doing their best. But when your goalie is second best goalie in every game in the series, then you're gonna have a rough time advancing. So something to look for, in terms of if you're looking for goaltenders. The goaltender market this summer is such a volatile position. So when you have one, it's worth its weight in gold. Jake Ottinger in Dallas, and Hellebuck in Winnipeg, and Vasilevsky in Tampa, and Shesterkin in New York, who was a main reason why that they've played so well. They haven't played well as a team. Shesterkin's been so good overall. So something to watch out for in the summer.
Yeah, and a lot of people are using this as an opportunity to further dance on Jack Campbell's grave. Like, oh, wow, he can't even get pulled in over the third string guy. And it's like, you guys realize he's been facing AHL shots for the majority of the year. If you throw him in right now, you are not only building a whole storyline around the series now that people are going to be losing their minds over, but you're also putting a guy in a horrible spot to likely fail miserably. Am I saying that he's going to rejuvenate his career? Not necessarily, but I think if that's going to happen, it's going to happen at the start of next season rather than throwing him in cold to take on a pretty high-powered Vancouver offense.
Yeah, and then how much it would blow up there if he got called up and miraculously trying to save this whole thing. Yeah. So, and I like Jack Campbell as a person. I think he's, you kind of root for a guy like that to kind of go through some lows and come back from it. But yeah, I just think that I think the league would love to see a McDavid in a final at some point. I don't know if he ever will get there, but I think it is good for the league if you see a guy like that in a cup final.
In a cup final, not getting cross-checked in the face.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that was such an unfortunate incident. But we can move past that to the important playoffs, Joe. That's right. Team Minnesota of the PWHL. They win Game 3 at the X on Monday night. Score a 2-0. We got Rooney with the 18-save shutout. Goals from Maggie Flaherty and Denisa Kryzheva. I had to look that one up. That is a tough one to read and pronounce. But as you're listening on Wednesday, Game 4 tonight at the XL Energy Center, 7 p.m. What do we got here, Joe?
Well, I think obviously it was encouraging after the first two games in Toronto where they were shut out to crack the scoreboard there and get some offense going and get a lead. So I think that might have kind of sparked something for them because it's been so hard to score against Toronto this year. But yeah, I think home crowd place is going to be packed. They want to force a Game 5. But clearly, just talking to Natalie for our interview, interesting season ups and downs for this team that I think lost like 5 straight down the stretch and kind of stuck in the playoffs, but still has some sneaky good talent that they can kind of, if they can kind of find a way here to force Game 5, make things pretty interesting.
We would very, very much love that. And with that, Joe, we might as well kick it over here to our highlighted interview guest for episode 13. This interview with Natalie Darwitz is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality. Who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it, that makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com and make sure you enter promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today is one of us by way of Eagan, Minnesota, University of Minnesota, and is a USA hockey legend. Now the first general manager of the newly launched Minnesota-based Professional Women's Hockey League franchise. That is an absolute mouthful. Natalie Darwitz, thanks for jumping on with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Matt, now we always open up with this, and you being a Minnesotan, hopefully there's something you can go off of with it. But the Minnesota Wild logo, it gets talked about a ton. People debate all the time, like what it looks like, what you should have seen. The first time you saw that logo, what did you think it was?
Maybe what jumped out at me was like the eyes. So I was like, okay, that's like a bear or something in the wilderness, you know. And then the trees in the background, but yeah, it grew on me as the Wild have been around for sure.
But like, did you see both right away, or was it like, oh, that's a bear, and then later on you're like, oh, wait, it's actually a nature scene too?
Yeah, it was the bear first, because then with the eyes. So I thought it was a bear, and then as you look closer, you see the wilderness and the trees like you guys have on your screen. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, whoa, actually, someone did a really good job on this. It was very thoughtful.
Yeah. Worked out pretty well. As you can see, we're Fellowship of the Rink, a playoff Lord of the Rings, and my wife and I, it's our favorite movie series there. I'm wondering if you have any favorite nerddoms or things that you kind of follow. If you're Lord of the Rings, collect anything, or Harry Potter, or like you have kind of any kind of quirks to maybe through your kids, you have something you kind of.
Oh goodness, I'm out of the loop with all the things you mentioned, like Harry Potter, and never really got into it. But I'm actually I'm pretty dorky to begin with, in just everyday life. But no, I mean, I'm pretty. The weird quirks about me are like I have to keep my grass nice. I have to shovel if it snows out right away, and if it like snows another inch, I'm like the one out there shoveling versus waiting for it to all come down and then shovel. So just stupid quirks like that I have, but not really into like the movie, the Star Wars stuff like that. I don't know, but those are kind of the silly quirks that I have.
So like just like me, a little borderline OCD almost. Like, did you have any crazy like superstitions when you were a player?
No, I mean, I wouldn't call them superstitions. I just had like routines that I would do. And if it didn't go exactly how I planned for it, like I didn't get wigged out at all, it was okay. But there was certainly things I like to do, like before games would like to throw the football around, like you see the players playing the soccer game. Like for me, it was throwing the football around and, just taping the stick and being loose and hanging out with teammates. Again, if it went out of whack, it wasn't the end of the world. Like I'd still be okay. Like some people have really big superstitions where if they're not there on the time on the clock, or if it doesn't go exactly how they have to have it, like they absolutely freak out. So that I didn't want to have. I didn't want to live an anxiety-filled life. So, but no crazy ones. One cool thing was growing up, I learned how to juggle. So I would juggle sometimes before the game, just get the hand-eye ready and all that stuff. So that's fun.
Speaking of things that are out of your control, which is probably hard for your job, I heard you had some fun travel issues getting to Toronto for your playoff series. I wasn't sure if you could take us through kind of, as the GM too, you're kind of in charge of everything, right? So you kind of have to fix all the different things. Like what was the craziest part about it?
Actually, for the most part, our travel has been really, really smooth. We've done the league and our team services. Emily Wood has done a tremendous job. Coming out of Minneapolis, obviously we're at a luxury that, we have Delta at our disposal and Air Canada and United and plentiful flights. So this honestly was just an anomaly where, you just had a not so good travel day, but honestly, it was the first one of the year. And we got here, we made it work. We did the best we could, and we got to the game. And, I know it was a little bit of a talk the other day, but honestly, it happens, and you just got to roll with it and make the best of it. And I think that's what we did.
Nice.
I was at the first home game for you guys, and it's incredible the amount of fans and young girls there and everything. And now that you kind of had a full season under your belt, like what's been the biggest takeaways from kind of the success of the league that you look back?
I think for us in Minnesota, I think obviously the first thing that comes to mind is our fan base. Obviously you were there for the 13,000 plus. I think we've had over an 11 game span, over 85,000 fans, which I think if you asked anybody in August or September how that would go, and if we would have 85,000 fans at Excel for 11 games, I think everyone would probably check the true false box and would check false. So that's been awesome. I think the people at the State of Hockey have showed up. Obviously, early on we were winning, so that certainly helped. But for us, I think that what we can look back on is the 13,000 home opener, and then I think we had 2 or 3 games above 10. Some people might be like, that's not significant. For us in the sport, it is. If you look at a state tournament and what they draw, or what the NCAA Division I draws for a Frozen Four, like we're well exceeding that, and we should as professional sports and the best players in the world. So from here, it's about how can we sustain that? How can we grow that? We certainly don't want to go down in year 2. We want to obviously raise the bar from year 1 and continue to raise the bar each and every year. So it's been terrific being in Minnesota. The State of Hockey has welcomed us. A lot of interest from local companies and corporations reaching out. Have done a lot of speaking engagements, and just the feedback on our team and our market and what our business staff is doing is just phenomenal. So there's a lot of great takeaways. No matter how this thing shakes out here on the ice, there are a lot of positive takeaways from year 1 in the PWHL, and especially our market.
One of our first interviews was Taylor Heisey on the show. And it just so happened that the recording was the day that the news broke about the awesome, I need to emphasize, awesome rule changes being instituted by the PWHL. And she was lit up. She was very excited about the idea of the whole choose your opponent aspect to the playoffs. Toronto chose you guys. Talk to me, like, now that it's actually happened, like, what have you seen in the locker room because of it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like Taylor was, it's a tremendous, the league has had a few initiatives that have just been awesome. Like from the jailbreak, being on the PK, if you score a shorty, you get your player back out of the box. And then obviously choosing your opponent here in playoffs. At that time, we probably thought that maybe we would be in the running for choosing our opponent. And unfortunately, we skidded into playoffs here. But, for us, it was, can we use it as motivation? Someone's choosing us. So there's a little bit of bulletin board material there. Unfortunately, game 1, we really weren't able to utilize that. But, as far as Toronto, they have a tremendous team. They're showing that right now. They're hot. They're playing well. And we certainly need, one play to change the momentum. And in playoff hockey, it can happen. So we're hoping that we can have that momentum change this evening. But as far as choosing it, I think it's just a cool dynamic. It happened right now. It was a 1-4 choice. But Boston and us were tied for, the number of points. They won the head-to-head competition. So that's why they were the 3rd seed. But it came down to a lot of factors. And I think one of them was they were smart about, we literally were just in Toronto last week. Sorry. So, having to turn around and go back to Toronto, obviously they're going to use that as let's pick Minnesota as well. So there are a lot of factors that, that was the reason they chose us. And we got to step up now and use it as bulletin board material and try to even the series up tonight.
Extremely classy of you to not point out that anyone from Toronto is just terrified of anyone from Boston as well. That certainly goes into the decision making.
Yeah, probably. And Montreal and Boston, they have obviously a storied rivalry, and NHL hockey too. So that's going on. So yeah, it sounds like everyone's has a fear of Boston in some way, shape, or form.
Another idea that Taylor had, we asked her for suggestions for the team name for you guys. And she said Purple Rain, the nod to Prince. And I was curious if I'm sure you've thought about this a lot. Like any suggestions on your mind, what you would like to be called, or?
That's the number one question we always get. It's an intriguing one, right? Because year one without a logo and name, and it's been fun at Excel. Like when the fans try to get the chant going, it's like Minnesota. It's like the syllables change each time. So it's funny. It's funny to hear it. But they've done a great job just rolling with it and making the best of it. Purple Rain's awesome. Obviously, in the start of the season, the league, designated what colors each team was. And so we obviously were purple. At first I was like, oh, well, the Vikings are purple, But it certainly has grown, I think, on all of us, especially me. And, I think it was kind of a nod to Prince too, is what I've heard too from the league say is why we're purple. So obviously the Purple Rain, what Taylor mentioned, is a great segue into that. From my understanding, being on the business side and wearing multiple hats, there's a lot of trademarks, IPs, rigmarole. So I think they're working through that. One name we brought forward last fall was Minnesota Miracle.
That'd be good
with the iteration, the MM, and then like Herb Brooks. There's a statue in front of Excel.
Yeah.
Most of the players on Miracle on Ice were from Minnesota. I just think it'd be so cool to have the throwback 1980 jerseys with the breezers with the stars down the side, the red breezers. Yeah. It just would be so cool to have those retro jerseys, And the name it rolls off the tongue well and stuff like that. So that's one name we brought forward. But at this time, we don't know what direction they're going to go in with the team name. I heard we will have team names by season 2 and logos and we just actually signed a deal. The league signed a deal with Bauer. Bauer will be doing our league jerseys next year. So a lot of exciting things in the works. Obviously, year one was inaugural, and we had to figure a lot out as we were in season. And I think year 2 is just going to be phenomenal with a lot of sponsorships and a lot of things in place. And hopefully one of those things is a name and a logo, and hopefully it's a good one.
I did not think that there was a world where I was going to be talked out of Purple Rain, but you might have just made the perfect pitch. I think that would be so cool. But on the flip side, regardless of what the team name ends up being, do you want a Minnesota Wild-esque, like brain teaser, hidden image type logo, or do you just want something simple, clean?
I'm old school. Like North Stars, like just a simple logo that is powerful. Yes. Like, I'm old school in that. Like the Gopher M on the chest is just old school. I love that. But it's hard, right? There's so many logos out there. There's so many names out there. There's so many different opinions. So we'll see what happens.
You obviously have a history of coaching in your career, and I know this is obviously a special opportunity to have this job, but what are the biggest adjustments for you in this role versus kind of what you've been previously doing, and what kind of excited you about it, to do this versus what you've been, comfortable with?
Sure. Yeah. It was a tough decision when I was kind of going through the interview process. They mentioned a couple of times, like, are you sure you don't want to coach? You're a coach by trade. I just felt at the time there was an opportunity for me to have a greater bandwidth, being the GM, and make more of an impact. As a coach, you're only, on ice and relationships with the players. Whereas I'm wearing many hats and hopefully have an accelerated, more efficient rate of growing women's hockey in the sport of hockey. So I think the hardest adjustment for me is not coaching, really, just because it's all I've known. And this is the first season I haven't in probably 10 to 12 years that I haven't been a coach. So I miss the relationships with the players, and I miss the intensity of games, being on the bench and being in the moment. But at the same time, it's been really fun to be in this position and be involved in different areas of the job. It's been really fun creating relationships with, possible sponsors or, the Minnesota Wild brass and stuff like that, and people in the area. It's been really great to do that. And then, just to have hands-on approach to hopefully growing this organization and making it the best organization possible with hiring great people, making great connections, and obviously drafting great players and hopefully franchise players and players like Taylor Heisey and Grace Zumwinkle, having them be in a Minnesota jersey their entire careers is hopefully a goal of mine too. And so that part's been a lot of fun. We were part of the first trade ever in PWHL history as well. So that was I think a first for everybody. No one's ever done a trade in women's hockey. It was new for the players too, to have a player, one day be your teammate and a new teammate the next day. So I think a lot of those things were a lot of fun and something that I don't think anyone envisioned until we would get a professional league, and it happened pretty quickly. Everything came together pretty fast.
What's the synergy been like, or relationship with the Wild? Like you mentioned, I don't know how much you were even able to talk with Guerin or throw ideas around, or just on the support staff side. Like I know you guys practice the trio, and you guys, Foligno's been out there with Taylor, and you've had a lot of kind of back and forth. But what's been the relationship like with those guys? It's
been great. I think in the early stages, the Whitecaps obviously were a professional team here, and when I first talked to Bill Guerin, he kind of thought it was going to be like a Whitecaps type league, and I had to go to him and say, hey, the Walter Group is financially backing Billie Jean King's involved. And so I just kind of, shared the 101 behind what the PWHL is going to be. And he was like, holy cow, this is amazing. At that time too, we were kind of looking for a practice facility. I coached at Hamlin, so we practiced out of Rink and just knew how amazing that place was, how great the staff is, how great the ice is. And so I knew we kind of wanted to be, if we're playing at Excel, let's have our practice facility hopefully be at Tria. And so Bill Guerin was a big part of us, going there and solidifying that was going to be our practice rink. We didn't have a locker room at the time. Obviously, you guys know at Tria, it's kind of tapped out for space. And so the Wild just built the Black Aces locker room. And he said, we're really not using it, Natalie, unless it's training camp or postseason for the Black Aces. And I said, well, we would really love to be there. And is there any way we can utilize that locker room for the year while we kind of, get our feet going and get our feet wet and figure this thing out? And he said, absolutely. Once that happened, the doors opened for us to be at Tria Rink and to have a facility on the third floor for weight training and medical and team meals. And then quite honestly, once we got there and we saw each other, like the team saw each other, and Bill would pop up and Mike Madonna would pop up for practice and stuff like that. And they saw the credibility and the product on the ice. I think they were really happy and really impressed with everything. And that just kind of further solidified the credibility behind the league and what we were doing. Once our first game happened in 13,000, I got a text from him with the crowd, and he was like, holy smokes, this is amazing. Yeah. And then, a lot of Wild brass have been at our games. Matt Maka, we had lunch with Craig Leopold. They're all taking notice of what we're doing, and they're really excited that we're at Excel and at Tria. And so it's just honestly been a great relationship, and it's grown over the year. And obviously I think we've helped out their pocketbook financially by having some good crowds and continuing in the postseason. So I think, from here on out, I think the relationship has started, and it has strengthened throughout the year, and it's going to hopefully continue to get better. We're really lucky too. We get to utilize a lot of their game day staff at Excel, which makes our product when fans come top notch and an NHL experience. And that's crucial, and that's huge for the growth of our sport. So we're really lucky and fortunate to have all the resources that the Wild are helping us with, and Excel and Tria are providing us.
Nice. And another thing that I think is huge for the growth of this new league is just the willingness to experiment, try different things. The rule changes we've already talked about that have been instituted. You've been a player, you've been a coach, you're a GM now. Put on the commissioner hat. Like, what's a rule change that you would institute if you were running the league for a day?
Oh, goodness. Oh, that's a good one on the spot. Man, that's a really good one. I love the jailbreak one. It just makes so much sense. that we've done, and I think everyone's taken notice of it. I'll have to come back to you on that one. I'm not a trash talker. Like if you put me on the spot, like 5 minutes later, I'll be like, oh, hey, by the way, and I come back to you, but I'm not a trash talker, like quick on the spot. So I got to come back to you on that one.
All right. You interrupt us when you get back to that one. This one should be, it'll take some deep thought, but.
What would you guys do? What would you do?
Thing is, a lot of the rule changes I want are the ones that you guys implemented. Like I told Taylor when we had her on, I have been all about the draft approach since Shane Doan brought it up back when like the Coyotes were tanking and his son is in the stands like cheering for them to lose because they want McDavid. Like I think that kind of stuff is fun and chaotic. I'm trying to think outside of what you guys have done. I don't know, Joe, do you have any?
No, I mean, it's hard because like it's such a smooth and clean surface to start out with. And so anytime you try something new, it kind of has a ripple effect on other things and you'll spark an idea for something different. Like I was going to ask you about the draft actually, because the NHL just had their lottery draft last week and you had an interesting experience with that, getting the number 1 pick. Like, I think you told me before you haven't won anything in your life, like off to like the checkers, stuff like that. And then you get the number 1 pick. Like, what was that moment like, or that day like to get, I think it's a randomizer, right? The hell was.
Yeah. We were all on like a Zoom call and they threw up some app that was a random itomizer and yeah, we won it. So that was pretty cool. Like I said to you, Joe, back in January, I never win pull tabs or bingo or anything. So that's pretty awesome that we won the first round draft pick, because obviously Taylor Heisey was high on everyone's lists and it was probably a no-brainer no matter who got that first draft pick that she was most likely going to be it. So certainly a great story that we could keep the hometown girl in Minnesota. For sure.
What's it like keeping that under wraps, by the way? Like, the whole time you're like, I know who we're picking, but you have to tell everyone like, oh no, there's some great players. We got to really put some thought into this. Like, does that just get tiring?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a truthful person. So I think I just said like, yeah, I have a pretty good idea who it is. So I wasn't lying. I did. At the same time, I wasn't going against any PR rules and letting the cat out of the bag. So, but a couple other ones of going back to different rules and ideas is 2 things we implemented early on in preseason that were interesting. Was you couldn't ice the puck on a PK.
I like that a lot.
And then the other one was we started the game as if you were in the second period. So you would twice be the opposite.
Ooh, I haven't heard that.
To create more offense. So you would have the long change twice.
That's really cool. Yeah.
What's that?
That's really cool. I'm sure the players liked it too. Kind of more of a
challenge. I think it did create more offense. I think it just kind of it was weird at the beginning because you're like, well, what blue line do you stand on for the anthem? Because then you'd be standing on the other team's side.
Yeah.
Where do you warm up? Do you warm up on our side? Like, so there were a couple intricacies that were unique to when we tried that. And then like it did create more offense because of the long change for sure. There was a lot more cherry picking a little bit, trying to get behind the D and stuff like that. So those were 2 that we tried to do. We tried to implement in pre-game or preseason games to see how we liked them. But the only ones to go through was the jailbreak one.
I really like though the idea of not icing on the penalty kill. Like, why do you get some benefit because you've committed an infraction? Like,
yeah, good point.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
You're part of the first trade in league history, and I know a big part of being a GM is signing players too. And Kendall Coyne is, one of the biggest names in the sport. And I was curious what your recruiting pitch was to get her on board, because obviously, anytime you're building a team, obviously you want really good players, but having that kind of a marketable name and personality, I'm sure is going to be good for that too.
Yeah, obviously Kendall has been a great ambassador for our sport and a big reason this league. She was kind of the magic piece of the puzzle with Billie Jean King to get her on board. And then obviously she knew Mark Walters. So she was a big part of why this league started, that connection. For us, it was a no-brainer. Number one, she is a tremendous player and ambassador, has had a great career. I felt we were a front runner for her based on her home she lives in Chicago, so we were the closest market to her. It's not hard to get to for her. You know, and then just with the players that, you know, getting the number 1 draft, and she knew who most likely I would lean towards as far as, you know, solidifying a roster and creating a roster were most likely going to be Minnesotans and U.S. players. It was just a no-brainer for her, I think, to join Minnesota. So she was part of the 3 free agents you got to sign before the draft happened. And the other 2 were Lee Steckline and Kelly Panic, obviously Minnesota superstars here. So, and Olympians. So that's kind of how that transpired with Kendall. It wasn't too hard of a pitch for her. I think we were her number 1. It was much harder dealing with her agent. Her agent is like a shark. Like all the other negotiations went really well, and Kendall's agent was terrific. So she comes from a tennis background and is friends with Billie Jean King. So I was like, I'm up for this one, and she gave me a good time. So Kendall's great. She's a great leader. You know, obviously she just had a kid 7-8 months ago. So I think you're starting to see her in the last few months get her legs back underneath her and her rhythm, and was playing good hockey for us for most of the year.
Nice. And you talk about the superstars of the Gophers, of Team USA. I asked Taylor this question, and I don't even know that there's a right answer. I feel like no matter what you say, I'm going to be disappointed you didn't pick the other. But playing for the Gophers, playing for Team USA, who do you hate more, Wisconsin or Canada?
Well, we got to be careful about the word hate.
Which is the bigger rival and the one that you take way more joy in defeating?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Probably Canada. Is that what Taylor said?
It is, yeah. She thought about it a little bit, but yeah, Canada.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough decision, but you know, when you beat them, it feels like you're on top of the world, and when you lose to them, it just feels like you're down in the dumps. So, obviously, tremendous amount of respect for both. You know, what Hockey Canada does, and University of Wisconsin, what they do. Mark Johnson's done a phenomenal job, just a legendary, obviously, player and then a coach. What he's done for women's hockey, you know, he'll probably be in the Hockey Hall of Fame if he's not already. So I know he's in the U.S. Hall of Fame, but he should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame here pretty shortly.
I mean, unofficial mascot if you guys end up going Minnesota Miracle, right?
He could be. That'd be cool. Yeah. It's a big caricature of Mark Johnson's face.
in.
So, yeah.
Who obviously the women on your team are role models for a lot of girls now in Minnesota and all around. Like, who were your, you know, role models, or who are the players you looked up to, you know, male or female, that you grew up watching hockey?
I grew up, you know, in the North Stars era. I'm aging myself, and Mike Modano was somebody who I looked up to. Neil Broughton. It was really cool with Mike Modano. We were both in the 2002 Olympics. I was 18 years old, and he was, I don't know how old, but it was really just cool to meet him in the 2002 Olympics, and obviously him being around the Wild now. It's just really cool. And then we played in a charity game that the Wild put on last summer. He was there, and I think I, you know, skated most of the charity game with him. So it's pretty cool getting passes from him. So as far as somebody like, you know, he was a little bit older than me, but Mike Crowley played for the Jaguars and then the Gophers, and I think he had a little bit of an NHL stint. I loved watching him. I remember my dad used to take me to the high school games, and I just zeroed in on Mike Crowley. He was just a smooth skater, creative. Obviously, he was a D, but at the same time, your eyes just were zeroed in on him just because he took care of the play and manufactured the play and everything. So he was the reason too. I wore number 20. He's the reason why I chose number 22. It's Mike Crowley. I'm not mentioning really any females because, you know, there really wasn't any at the time. We were playing boys hockey growing up. So you heard of names like Cami Granato and, you know, I think at the time, like Alana Blahofsky was a U.S. Olympian out of Minnesota. But the hard part is you never got to really see them. They were never live. So, that's why I think this is so great now is these little girls and boys can come to the rink and they can see Taylor Heisey and Grace Zumwinkle live and Kendall Coyne and all these players and see them up front and get to meet them. And our players are doing a terrific job getting out in the community and being great, role models and ambassadors. I think per our player bargain agreement, they have to do 3 appearances, and we have a spreadsheet of keeping track of those. And I think some of our players are at 15, going above and beyond. And I think Taylor and Grace are leading the way with doing those. So that shares we have the right people that are role models and great hockey players are on the ice leading this charge.
I know you have to keep one eye on the present, one eye on the future as a GM. Like, you haven't watched this team all season. Do you have a idea of kind of areas you look to attack in the draft, I guess, or kind of way you want to support the group you currently have?
For sure. That's, always present moment. We want to win, but at the same time, I got to think about, what our squad's going to look like next year and who's in the draft and what areas we need to fill. So quite honestly, going into the draft, I thought we'd be a more offensive team. I think our goal totals are lower than I like. Whereas originally I thought our D was going to kind of be the concern, and our D's been pretty steady for most of the year, and our goaltending other than this last month. But so I think, with the players that are in the draft, if we can get a couple solid forwards and a D or 2, that'd be really great. I think I like our goalie situation right now, and I don't know if I'll be in the hunt for a goalie, but I think it's a good draft class coming in. I'm not sure you guys are aware or heard this news too, but Minnesota will be hosting the draft in June in St. Paul. So we're really excited about not having to travel and get to host and showcase our great state and invite everybody here from the league and the draftees. And I think we'll also be having maybe an award show as well from this season. So just tremendous opportunity that we have, and we're fortunate that the league picked our market, and I think that's just a testament for the fan base we've had all year and how strong our market's been in Minnesota.
That's really cool. And I mean, you talked about looking forward to next year. Like, you always have to be doing that as the GM, which is a little bit different than what you've done in the past. With the NHL, it's different, right? Like, there's longer term contracts. Like, you're looking way down the road as you're constructing teams. Is it really just looking to next year? Is it that short term, or how far out as a GM in the PWHL are you looking as you're thinking about roster construction?
Yeah, well, we only have, going into next year, we'll only have 11 that will be on multi-year contracts. So 11 out of 23. So, I think the biggest proponent's going to be if you're not a part of those 11, and that's over half the team, times that by 6 markets, there's going to be a need for free agencies. Mm-hmm. So can we pick up somebody who's on a 1-year contract out of Boston, Montreal? So not only are we looking forward to draft great players in this upcoming draft, but we can go out and get free agents from other teams that have only signed players for 1 year. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, and it's a lot different than the NHL. So a lot of the makeup might be in those free agents because you got to see them play at this level and where they fit in. Obviously, college to pros is going to be a significant jump for most collegiate players. So the fact that what these free agents have done at this level and can do, that might be an area for us to look at a little bit more seriously. Obviously, I think the first 3 or 4 rounds of the draft are significant too. So you just got to kind of understand what needs your roster has and what we want moving forward. A couple logistics for us is, like you said, the NHL, we can't sign a player for over 3 years. So like Taylor Heisey, we signed for 3 years this year, which means we have her for 2 more remaining. I could only go get her for 1 more year to keep that 3 alive. I couldn't give her an 8-year contract. So there are a couple stipulations and policies and procedures we have to follow so that everyone across the board is following the same thing. So,
but does it work that way? Can you just like every year, could you like go to Taylor, be like, hey, do you want to extend 1 more year, and like keep bumping it like that? Or do you have to wait until a certain period to do so?
No, I could bump her and keep bumping her 1 year. The policy is I believe you can't sign anybody with the roster of 23. They can't be over 21 years if you add them up.
Okay, got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you go over those 21 years, you're not compliant.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you taking the time for us today. We have a question we always ask to end our interviews. Are you a golfer, though? I don't know. We have to
yeah, I golf. Every hockey player golfs to some capacity, right?
Good. Well, we have our Waggle Golf question. GetYourWaggleOn.com. Use promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. Natalie, who is in your dream golf foursome? So 3 other people, dead, alive, athlete, whatever. Like it can be, we've had actors, we've had pro athletes, whatever. Who rounds it out?
That's a great one. I'll go for the celebrity Reese Witherspoon.
Okay.
I think she might be really funny in a setting like that. Hockey player. I'll do Cami Granado. Okay. And then let's see. I'll throw my dad in there too. You gotta have a family member, and then obviously me. So
yeah. Who's in your cart?
Oh, my dad.
Yeah.
Got to take care of him. Yeah.
Somebody's got to be his caddy, right? So
yeah, someone's got to do it. Yeah. So
there we go.
He'll be thanking the slices for us. So
there you go.
Yeah.
That's why it's a best ball, right? Or it's a a scramble.
We'll go scramble on this one. Yeah, I didn't pick the best golfers. So we'll go scramble.
Is that designed so you win?
Pardon?
Designed so that you win, or?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think I picked 3 females without Norton, and we'll start from the red tees and get the advantage from the other ones. So that's one of the things when we do scrambles, they love having female hockey players because we help them out on the drives.
There you go.
Nice.
So yeah.
But well, we appreciate your time and enjoyed this conversation, and good luck. And hopefully, assuming my paternity leave doesn't start before then, love to come out to the draft and check it out in June. So excited to kind of see what's in store for year 2 with the Minnesota Miracle.
That sounds good, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Good ring to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you taking the time and inviting me on.
Absolutely.
Thank you again, Natalie Darwitz, for taking some time on a game day, no less, to record that interview with us. But a lot of great nuggets there. She's actually just a wealth of knowledge, and you could tell she was very much doing her best to stay polished and not say anything out of bounds. But maybe next time we interview her, we can push her a little bit further.
I think sometimes, in the playoffs, you do want to be a little bit, more vanilla there. But I think she has such cool stories about, it's just a cool path, right? Like a Gopher legend, Olympian, goes to be a coach, and then all of a sudden gets the call to be a GM of the inaugural team in this league. She's done a heck of a job with them. And I know the hardest thing for her is to not be coaching or playing, and being the GM seat is such a different feeling for her. But you could tell the foundation built there with Taylor Heisey and Zumwinkle, and obviously a lot of talented women from Minnesota. So they're trying to build around the Minnesota roots here into a franchise.
Yes, and have to say apologies to everyone, as I've said the last couple episodes, that there wouldn't be any more Barrel Theory at the X. I was wrong. We have hockey at the X again tonight, and if you're there, make sure you grab yourself a Barrel Theory beer if you're of drinking age, of course. Sections 105, 112, 217, and club level 36. If you do go and grab one of them, please throw a picture up, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, tag us. We'll make sure to share and engage with it. But please support our good friends at Barrel Theory Beer Co., who bring you yet another segment of Keyboard Warriors. And Joe, the 2 that we have here are actually off of the incident you mentioned earlier in the show with Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson going at each other. First one from a longtime listener and big super fan of ours, our friend Mark Parrish. Love for country greater than love for teammates. And I actually had to stop and think about this one because I actually don't know like where my allegiances would lie. Because like, yes, country is like first and foremost for a lot of these guys, but you got teammates that you're literally going to war with year in, year out. And like when it comes to the sport of hockey, I got to imagine there's bonds that get solidified way deeper with who you play with in the NHL than the bonds with your countrymen that you play with maybe for a couple months a year if you're playing in these and not in the playoffs, or once every 4 years if we have the Olympic competition stay longer term. But what do you think about this?
It's a tough one, but I have to imagine playing for your country is like a whole nother level emotionally that you have invested. Like you're invested as an NHL player, and like Stanley Cup's the biggest prize you can have, of course. But if a gold medal isn't 1B, it's right up there. And I think things get really heated and passionate when you, like in the case of Olympics, let's say they play in the Olympics 20, that's one chance in a lifetime for some of these players to play in the Olympics. And the guys on your team are your teammates too. Like the guys you play for Team Sweden are your teammates, not just Matt Boldy and Zuccarello or whatever. So that is a very difficult question because I think that it crosses two different kind of boundaries there. And I don't think just because Act cross-checks Boldy in the face doesn't mean they can't still be good teammates in Minnesota. But there's something unique about playing for your country, I'm told from people who have done this before, that, the emotions get wrecked up in those kind of tournaments. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer than you think.
Yeah, no, and it's pride for the country and for the flag and the colors. So that makes sense. You got to imagine too, like maybe there's just something that happened this year that Boldy did that pissed Eck off. He's like, yes, this is my chance where I can do it without getting in trouble.
Well, like the practices, there's some contact in practices, right? But let's not pretend that it's some major collisions, right? No one wants friendly fire and all of a sudden a guy getting out for 3 weeks. So with a lower body injury that we already saw in practice. But yeah, I think, it's all well and good when you're playing each other in hell. No one's in it. Bill Guerin's not going to get upset if you're cross-check Matt Boldy when you're playing in front of the net, right? I think this place you want Matt Boldy to play in front of the net. So
fair.
That's what happens.
All right. No, that checks out for me. The other one we have here was another quote tweet of my post of that video from Hot Take Hockey. Yes, at Hot Take Hockey, which I don't know. Maybe they're going to have to get in on more of this because this one's spicy. Boldy for Marner, puts in parentheses with extension. Add Robertson and or Liljegren if you need. If Wild somehow are even willing to move Rossi, build a package around him instead. Wow, that I wasn't ready for that.
I wasn't either, and I saw something. Somebody posted something about, the Wild going after Marner, and it almost seemed like nonsense to begin with because of the whole semantics of the no move clause. And if he had a no move clause, where would he want to waive it to go to? And the idea if you get Marner, but you give up Boldy, you take away one part, very dynamic, powerful, dynamic goal scoring winger for another one, right? Maybe obviously Marner could be considered a better player overall, but like I don't think the net add is that much of a big splash move for me. If that is even possible, because I don't think that I don't think A, the Wild want to move Matt Boldy, and B, I don't think Mitch Marner, of his list of 4 teams he will agree to leave his hometown of Toronto for, is going to be the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, but I can see it. I mean, it might be a little cold for him moving north to the Twin Cities, but the one angle of it, because I agree, like it's somewhat of a lateral move. You're getting an older player, and I think Boldy's got the size and physicality where he can be more of a playoff factor. But if you've got Kaprizov extending for long-term big ticket, I gotta imagine that Mitch Marner is more of an enhancement to Kirill Kaprizov than Matt Boldy is. Just in the way he plays and the way he'd be able to facilitate and set up Kaprizov. Like you're looking at a no shit 50 goal scorer, if not more, in Kaprizov if they're both healthy. And for that line specifically, if you are planning on keeping them with Ek, the size piece is less important. That being said, this isn't happening. I don't expect it. I'm not asking for it, but that's the one wrinkle where I could absolutely see, like, you put Marner on a line with Kaprizov. That sounds really fun.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. It sounds fun for sure. I mean, I think the line this year, I think Boldy and Kaprizov played pretty well together this year. You know, that line was one of the best lines in hockey with him, Ek, and Kaprizov. So, and again, Boldy has his deficiencies as a player, and he's not a finished product, I don't think. Like, I think there's more room to grow there. He also makes $4 million less over 6 more years than Marner at $11 million, plus he'll get extended in a year for more than that. So do you want to pay, if you're the Minnesota Wild, do you want to pay Kaprizov whatever $12 million and you want to pay Marner $12 million or whatever, you know? So I just don't, you know, you're paying Faber $9 million soon, like, you know. So yes, I think these you know, fantasy GM kind of moves sound kind of fun. On the basis you're like, oh yeah, Marner and Kaprizov would be great, but so would Draisaitl and Kaprizov when he signs a free agent in a year and a half. So like, you know what, there you go.
That is a scenario where I will gladly pay 2 guys on one line $12 million each. Yeah. If that was a realistic opportunity, sign me up, no question.
Yeah, well, he's one of the best players in the world, so I
very different player.
You do that, but. Anyways, I don't see a Marner for Boldy swap happening. It is that what they call it, hot take though, right? You know, they didn't say like most logical take or like most boring. Not gonna, you know. So
logical takes would be quite the segment. Oh man, but okay, that's what we have here for the hot takes this week. Again, check out Barrel Theory Beer Co. tap room, or if you're at the X tonight, crush it. Joe, before we close out here, though, I know, we've got some articles out that we've already talked about. We've got the polls coming out that you guys are going to be writing on more in depth as this releases. Anything else you want to promote or point out to the listeners? Yeah,
well, I'll have my deep dive in the Iowa and the prospect system coming out in the next couple of weeks here. I know Mike and I will continue to write about as the Wild will probably do some front office tweaks coming up, you know, just because they had, you know, they didn't replace Chris Ohgren yet. So you'll probably see some internal promotion coming up there. And we'll have some stories coming up as far as who stays and who goes. Typical offseason kind of story of trade tiers of who might be available and things like that. And eventually, because maybe it could come anytime, so I might as well tease the story now, is I talked to a bunch of NHL players who are dads for advice is for a first-time dad like myself for a fun story on their experiences. So some are like, no shit, this is obvious, but some of them are pretty cool. So that'll run whenever I start my leave and go on hibernation.
Love that. That sounds fun.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's no matter who you are, if you're a millionaire NHLer or let's say everyone is absolutely positively terrified the first day they go home with the baby and they put him in the car and like, okay, this is gonna be the slowest drive I've ever had in my life. So that's, I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but you had the winter time too. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know how to explain it, but yeah, it's just a whole new level of excitement and anxiety all wrapped into one. It's pretty crazy.
It's like that scene from Knocked Up in the movie when he's driving on the freeway and everyone's honking behind him. He goes, I don't care. I'm gonna go 12 miles an hour. I don't care. They can wait to wrap up all they want to. He's just driving home like this. So.
Yeah, exactly. And that's basically it. You realize how little you care about other people's opinions as long as you're like preserving and keeping that child going.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But hopefully we have a few more podcasts before that happens. But yeah, it's been another fun one. We'll have cool guests lined up for next week too. Mike Rupp, NHL Network, longtime NHLer and Cup champion. So he'll talk about the NHL playoffs, the Minnesota Wilds and stuff like that. So, but yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone, thank you for your continued support. We get more and more views by the episode. So thank you for sharing, whether it's with your friends, family, or maybe we're just catching it by random word of mouth. If you are new, please do subscribe to both the show and if you want to get clips of video, that's more your thing, subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Soda Pod. Otherwise, anything you can do, 5-star review, whatever. We appreciate anything you guys can do to continue supporting us. We will do everything we can to keep on providing great interviews and great NHL coverage, not only through the summer, but really going full steam come next NHL season. Because I know this year we kind of got in a little bit late because of my complications, obviously having the first kid, and launching in the middle of that would have been, well, a mistake to say the least. So we had to kick it off a little late, but only more and just better things to come, we hope.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. And we will talk to you next week.
You stay classy, State of Hockey.